We as Californians and we as Americans have an absolute responsibility to ensure that that large bureaucracy that they will control, that will waste, that will cover up, that will tell us that everything is great when in fact it's not true, are held accountable. There are many ways to do it. And I'm going to tell you something here tonight that most people, my own campaign people, know it. I thought about running for the U.S. Senate this cycle. I thought about what I would give up. I would give up the ability to do the most important part of the constitutional responsibility of Congress, to hold the executive branch accountable, to contain them to only that which the American people, through their elected representatives in the House and the Senate, allocate for them to do. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Leader Boehner and the conference voting out all earmarks. We do no earmarks whatsoever now. The amazing thing is we never did 10% of the earmarks that every administration has done. I mean, what's a government grant if a cabinet officer can issue it and come in for the ribbon cutting? Have we really just begun to realize that the growth of government is so great that $1.4 trillion will be borrowed to support this government? And before you lose track of what $1.4 trillion is, some people always want to say, well, if you gave away $1 million a day since the birth of Christ, you still wouldn't have given away $1 trillion. Now, the problem is, I wasn't there for that birth. I believe in it, but I just wasn't there, so I have a hard time with that. But let me give it to you another way. If you laid off the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, if you did away with every piece of road construction, every new federal building, you did away, in fact, with the entire effective discretionary budget, you still have some of the deficit left. We are basically have run out of money before we get through what's called the non-discretionary. So before Congress authorizes one actual penny of what's called discretionary spending, we're out of money. You don't have to know how much that is to know that we are dead wrong. And here's something that will scare you even more. If we take the top taxpayers in America, that top bracket, that amazing bracket that keeps moving, you know, the millionaires, the 250, the 200,000, wherever Obama puts the filthy rich in the future, if you take that entire group, and we'll just take the top 3%, and you tax them at 100%, you don't eliminate the deficit. Here's one for you. If you tax them at 100% and take away their residual wealth, you don't eliminate the deficit. We as Americans, the 50%, 47 to 50% that don't even pay a penny in net tax, we are going to have to tax ourselves or we're going to have to shrink government. The top 53% that pay all of the cost of our nation are going to have to shrink government or there isn't enough money to do it. Now, I'm a social conservative and I'm a fiscal conservative. And before I went to Congress, I thought that was enough. And it isn't. Tonight, I will tell you that we have to be willing to tear down the Republican Party as we have grown to know it and rebuild it as a better and stronger and more constitutional party than it's ever been. We have to say, and Ron, you were ready for this, but not everyone was. We have to say to the Tea Party, get out of our way, you're not going far enough. You're not strident enough, you're not angry enough, that government has grown so big that the opportunities that we inherited from our parents, and they inherited in many cases from World War II and World War I vets coming home, we've stolen it. It's gone. The $13 trillion in debt has already eclipsed the inheritance we all got, and that's without the unfunded portions that exist. We have already squandered the legacy of our parents. Now, before you think that this is the opposite of Ronald Reagan's Morning in America, that it's midnight in America, it's not. We can recover. But to recover, we have to be the party that makes a difference. Now, in November, they're going to vote the Democrats out. I'm here today to tell you we will be the majority party in the U.S. House. But that's not good enough. That's not going to make the difference. We've been the majority party before. I had my first 6 years in the majority. It wasn't enough. And if I'd been there for the 6 years of the majority from 1995 through our loss, or the 94 election, if you will, it wouldn't have been enough. I like Denny Hastert. I know Denny Hastert is a good man. I like Newt Gingrich. But Newt Gingrich took the committee that I serve as head of, and he chopped it down because he said, we've got to cut back. Poor Newt went the exact wrong direction, and he's a historian. You don't reduce the only check on growing an out-of-control government by reducing the people who do the oversight. Just the opposite. We need more inspector generals. We need more transparency. What we need, and what I tried to get in the financial reform, and I will get as chairman of government oversight, we need data transparency of every single document, unclassified, and every single expenditure and every single activity of the federal government. We need it seamlessly available to you, the public, because we need everyone in this room and everyone in America to have the real opportunity, as you Google to find a picture of somebody, to Google to find the waste, fraud, and abuse in government, the absurdity of government. There are organizations on the far left that today I'm partnering with because they've developed over time a healthy disregard for government. POGO. They never heard of a Republican they liked, and they actually gave me an award. Why? Because they hate the federal government, because they're looking for a conspiracy everywhere. And by the way, they're all Democrats. But you know what? We should have been the party that produced the Sunlight Foundation and POGO. We should have been the party that said from day one, we've got to get involved in ensuring there is so much transparency, so much sunlight, that not one penny of waste could go on. The craziness that goes on in government all the time, and Abel talked about it. He was able to go in and cut the size of what he does fairly quickly. Renegotiate. Can you imagine government thinking of something proactive the way Abel did? Renegotiating a lease at a time when every lease is going down. I've got to tell you, the census moved in the bottom of a building that I lease, and they paid double what I pay upstairs. And I'm the guy that's supposed to, if we get the majority, be completely in charge of the census. I was furious. I said, how did you come up with that? They said, well, it's a short lease. I said, yeah, but it was an empty suite. You know, for half the price, the guy still would have put you in it. That's the kind of thinking that has to happen. I'm a proud Republican. I'm a Reagan Republican. The first president I voted for was Richard Nixon. I'm not a Nixon Republican. Nixon was a big government Republican. He was a guy that thought that there was a Republican solution to government. And I voted for George W. Bush. But I'll tell you, many of the programs that we enacted under George W. Bush are proving to be just the same as Richard Nixon programs. You grow the federal government, particularly outside of its mandate, and you grow the unnecessary waste that goes hand in hand with it. We, the Republican Party, have to stop that. Now, I'm going to give you just a couple of more quick ones. Some of you in this room, Charles, I'm going to venture that you're giving away enough money, but you probably will still be in a high tax bracket after Prop 20 wins and Prop 27 is defeated. At least I hope so. Save a little. The truth is, though, that we're talking about this Bush tax cuts. Now, most people can't really put it in perspective, and they just listen to Bush tax cuts and say, well, I don't want to give up the tax cuts. Why not defend the obvious, which is, at the end of the Bush administration, the most highly productive people in America are still paying more than they did when Ronald Reagan left office, even than when George Herbert Bush left office. Matter of fact, they're just paying a little bit less than when Bill Clinton left office, and a whole lot more than when Bill Clinton came in. The truth is, we just shaved a little of the top. On the other hand, we took a huge amount of people who should have paid a little bit, should have been part of the investment in America. We took them completely off the rolls. And it was a mistake. It was a real mistake. Americans who need a helping hand should get that helping hand. But every American should pay some tax and be invested in this process. So as we start talking about tax policy, let's talk about it logically. Every American should invest and pay as they can for their country. There should be no vilification of one group and no, well, of course I don't pay to another. Just the opposite. We should all pull what we can pull. And that's not what's being talked